Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode, before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 1, Episode 8, Save Me. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. In this episode, Izzy helps a psychic patient. Christina books an abortion while helping a patient who chooses to keep her baby at the expense of her own life and treatment. Karev comes up with a solution for a religious patient that's better in line with her religion so that he can save her life. And Derek does a spinal surgery going in blind despite the test showing up negative on the faith that there is something wrong with the patient, which does end up saving their life as well. So after I rewatch the episodes, I rank the episodes on two lists. The first list is a mostly objective list, which uses set values in order to score the episode. And then the second list is a personal ranking, which is just purely based on opinion and emotion. As always, we start with the mostly objective rank values, and I've highlighted those that I felt applied to this episode. So to start off with, we have a positive 4 points for our main relationship development, which is between Derek and Meredith. At the start of the episode, we find out that Derek has pretty much moved in with Meredith and has been living at her house for the last week consistently. However, because it's always at her house and she doesn't know where Derek lives, Meredith starts questioning exactly how much she knows about Derek throughout this episode and keeps asking him a bunch of questions about his preferences, where he lives, wanting to spend the night at his place instead of always at her place, to learn more about him. Well, he kind of tries to, I feel like he tries to reassure her, but also is looking for her to have faith in the relationship. You know, he encourages her to have faith, says that they're having a good time, why ruin their good thing? You know, he keeps telling her that what they have is a relationship where, you know, he leaves the toothbrush at her house and some clothes behind, and that it's a good thing that they have. And then throughout the episode, as they treat a patient on faith, Meredith sort of starts to learn. I don't want to say learn, but she starts to become a little more trusting of faith. Like they go in blind, and then there actually is an issue that all the tests missed. And had they not done that, the patient would have faltered. And so that teaches her the life lesson of maybe she should have a little more faith in it. And then that is when he decides to take her at the end of the episode to the land that he bought, which is currently empty apart from the trailer that he's currently staying in, as he doesn't yet know what he wants to do with the land. And he tells her about his family, his preferences, some of his hobbies, where he got the scar on his head, which I have a pretty big screen TV and I honestly did not notice a scar on his head, but he apparently has one. And so basically he gives her everything that she wants, and basically he tells her, now I've answered all of your questions. We'll have to go on faith from here and take it as it goes, and she'll have to take a chance on him. And they then, of course, head towards the trailer. The second points that the second item from the chart that applies is also worth 4 points, and that is the multi-season main character development. A minor development that occurs is that at the end of the last episode, we saw Christina looking at pregnancy tests, though that was where the episode cut off. In this episode, we see her at an abortion clinic making an appointment to have the pregnancy terminated, presumably without telling anybody at all that she is pregnant. And then with Derek, we get some character development as we obviously get him telling Meredith and therefore us as the audience quite a lot about his family, his preferences. We get to learn that he has bought land, that he's living in a trailer currently, etc., etc. So there's some character development there. I'm just counting it as one set of 4 points because while it is character development, it is pretty minor character development on both ends. So combined, I'm going to count it as 4 points. And then the final 4 points in the positive on the mostly objective rank values is the multi-season main character growth. And this one is Izzy. At the start of the episode, she's making cupcakes based on her mom's recipe, but she can tell that something's not right with them as there's an ingredient missing. But she refuses to call her mom, and we as the audience aren't at first told why, but it's clear that she hasn't contacted her mom in a long time, and she doesn't want to contact her mother for whatever reason. There's obviously some sort of unknown conflict there. As the episode progresses, she is very hostile towards the psychic patient, or the patient claiming to be psychic. And then as the episode progresses, we eventually learn that the reason she's so hostile to the psychic patient has to do with her conflict with her mother, in that she grew up in a trailer park. She waited tables. She had earned that money in order to put herself through school, but she ended up having to spend that money on her mother's debts, and her mother got into debt because she constantly called phone psychics for readings, to the point where she could no longer afford it, and Izzy had to bail her out with her college tuition money, which is also why Izzy then had to become a model to put herself through medical school. And luckily, she is not in debt at this point. But obviously, that is where the conflict with her mother stems. But then the psychic patient, after he has a surgery, still seems to have his gift and tells her to add a tablespoon of coconut oil to the recipe. She then goes back to the house, makes another batch of the chocolate cupcakes, including the coconut oil, and it is exactly how she remembered it being when her mom made it, so that was the ingredient she was missing, and this gives her a little bit more faith, and so in the end of the episode, she ends up being able to grow and call her mother for the first time in basically since she went to college, because she had indicated that once she bailed her mother out of debt, she left and she never went back, never called back. So that, of course, is growth, that she is now willing to reach out, and that she has learned that sometimes there are things that can't be explained, and she has a little bit more faith because the psychic made so many correct predictions within the hospital, enough so that she is now willing to reach back out to her parent. And for I think the first time in the series, we actually don't have any of the negatives applying, in my opinion, to this episode. And so with 12 out of 10, and the highest score we can actually get is 10 out of 10, this episode is yet another 10 out of 10 episode. So when we do the mostly objective list, if more than one episode has the same score, we just put it in episode order. So that makes this episode, even though it's 10 out of 10, in fourth place. So to remind us of our season 1 ranking so far on the mostly objective list, in first place we had A Hard Day's Night. In second place, No Man's Land. Third place, Shake Your Groove Thing. Fourth place is this episode, Save Me. In fifth, The Self-Destruct Button. Sixth, If Tomorrow Never Comes. Seventh is The First Cut is the Deepest. And eighth is Winning a Battle and Losing the War. Which now brings us to our personal ranking, which is fully based on my own opinions. So in this episode, I'll start with the patient. So Mr. Duff, who is the psychic patient, comes off as a very likable person. You know, he has great rapport with any of the doctors that he's dealing with at any given point in time. He's also a very good-looking actor. At least he fits my personal type. So there's a certain level of happiness that you get when you can look at something that's pretty on screen. It just adds an element of positivity to whatever you're watching. So even though I wasn't overly enthusiastic about really any of the patients in this episode, it earns points for one of those patients being an incredibly good-looking man. Obviously, pretty much all of the predictions he gives in this episode do turn out to be true. He first predicts that a patient on the fourth floor is going to die. Of course, that is the ICU floor, so that is not that difficult of a prediction. He then predicts that Christina is pregnant, saying that he didn't expect her for the mommy track, which is when Christina then swaps out with Izzy. Izzy, who has heard about the psychic patient and volunteers to take Christina's place in order to spend more time with the patient. As she treats the patient, he brings up some more predictions about her, including getting her childhood nickname of Cricket correct, fixing her mother's recipe, talking about the chocolate cupcakes to begin with, saying that when he looks at her, he envisions chocolate cupcakes, etc., etc. At first, he decides he doesn't want the surgery to fix his condition because he worries that that will take away part of who he is, which is his psychic abilities. However, it's after the surgery, when everything goes well, that he still seems to be himself and have those psychic abilities, as that is when he tells Izzy how to fix the recipe or how to get the recipe the way her mother made it. As a child, of course, as mentioned under Mr. Duff's case, he finds out Christina's pregnant. She kind of panics at this because she didn't want anybody to know. She hasn't told anyone, and she is planning an abortion. So Izzy takes her place. She ends up with Izzy's patient, who is a breast cancer patient who happens to be pregnant. And so it kind of backfires. She's trying to escape the psychic knowing she's pregnant and then ends up with a pregnant patient. With this patient, essentially, it comes down to the breast cancer is aggressive, she needs treatment. However, any of the treatments that they could do would result in the death of the baby, and so they are suggesting a medical abortion to evacuate the fetus so that they can treat her cancer. And this patient does go a little bit back and forth on the decision, but ultimately decides to keep her baby instead. And even though that means that she's not going to be able to treat her breast cancer and therefore will likely die before she can see her child grow up, her reasoning is that her husband will still be there for the child. They will still be together even when she's not there. And obviously, being a mother is so important to her, considered a miracle because she's in her late 40s. And so this baby was basically conceived after they had given up on being able to have children. And she prioritizes the baby, which kind of applies a contrast to Christina's decision, which is despite having no difficulties that would prevent her from having a baby, is deciding to abort the baby as a form of birth control because of her irresponsible decision. Now, abortion's a very controversial topic, of course, and with all things there is nuance to it. However, I have never been a fan of abortion as birth control personally. I think that if you're irresponsible, there are other options like adoption, as the person Christina speaks to notes, like she can put the baby up for adoption. I see no reason why you wouldn't give a child a chance at life and to be raised by someone who will love them, especially since I can't remember. Let me just look up if Christina was adopted. Oh, no, she had a stepfather, but I don't think she was adopted. Anyways, the point is, there's nothing wrong with giving the baby up for adoption. No one says she has to raise the baby. No one says she has to have anything to do with the baby. But I still think aborting the baby, not a decision I would personally agree with. Let me put it that way. And then the next patient that we dealt with was a rock climber who fell off while rock climbing and has creeping paralysis that starts in his lower legs and makes its way up to his hands and his stomach area. And Derek, despite seeing nothing on any of the tests that he runs, the MRIs, etc., decides that before the paralysis reaches his heart and his lungs, which would result in basically him dying, that he's going to, on faith and with his instinct and expertise as a doctor, go in and perform the surgery blind to find the clot he believes has to be there, despite the tests. And Meredith questions him on this, but he is the attending. The surgery goes ahead, and after several hours, they do actually end up finding the clot and being able to remove it to prevent the paralysis from spreading further, though it is unknown whether or not the paralysis that already existed there would be reversed, though after the operation, we do see that he is able to move his finger again, and that gives hope that he potentially will be able to get some of his mobility back, Whether it will be all of it or not, we as the audience will never know, but that gives hope that there will be. And then the last patient that we kind of deal with in this episode is a girl who is very religious, even though her parents are not as religious. She's very heavily into her religion, which is as an Orthodox Jew. And due to her thin blood or a blood condition that she has, her heart isn't strong enough to deal with a synthetic valve, so they want to put in a pig valve, which is an option. However, because of her religion, she refuses to have a part of a pig inside of her body, as that would go against her religion. In this one, we kind of see, I'll give it an honorable mention for character development and growth for Alex, in that he goes above and beyond to find an alternative option from the pig or the synthetic valve for her heart surgery, and ends up coming up with bovine or a cow valve instead, as it's a new surgery, only been around for a few years. Burke initially is upset with Alex for coming up with the solution because he's never performed that type of surgery before, and kicks Krev off of the case. However, then he and Christina have a little bit of a heart-to-heart, though, and she says that his problem is one with a solution. Not all problems have solutions, and basically by not being supportive, she kind of is supportive, and he ends up basically agreeing to do the surgery even though he's never done it before, and brings Alex back onto the case. Alex then is tasked with finding the patient a rabbi to do a blessing before the surgery, and Burke goes and finds someone who pioneered the bovine surgery, who's an expert in that field, to basically consult via satellite while he's doing the operation to make sure that everything goes well and he can perform the surgery well, with minimal complications and correctly. Obviously, basically what you can see from this is there's basically the theme of faith and taking chances, and then the side note of the abortion debate, where one person chooses to keep the baby at the risk of their life and the other one chooses to use abortion as birth control, and that contrast in the way that they are thinking about their children and the value that they deem the child to have. Overall, I liked a lot of the episode. I didn't love it. I also didn't really dislike anything in the episode. And so I thought this episode was average. So I decided to score it a 5 out of 10 as my personal ranking overall. So as a reminder of the season 1 rankings so far, on the personal ranking, we have in first place, the self-destruct button. Second, shake your groove thing. If tomorrow never comes is next at third. Fourth is no man's land. Fifth, a hard day's night. This episode, Save Me, falls into sixth place. And then in seventh, winning a battle, losing the war. And in eighth, the first cut is the deepest. And then now we come into our series ranking so far. This is where we're going to be ranking each season against each other. In this season, there are 9 episodes, which means a total maximum score of 90 can be achieved. With this episode's 10, we are now at 64 out of 90 on the mostly objective ranking. And then on the personal ranking side, it was a score of 5, which brings us up to 59 out of 90. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 1, Episode 8, Save Me. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.